Daf Yomi, Tractate Sanhedrin, page 18b, top of the page. Yud Ches Amud Beis. We just started the new parak of Kohen Gadol, and we're on top of 18b, where we're talking about it was necessary for the Braita to state the latter clause, lest it enter your mind to say, since it is written about one who kills unintentionally and is exiled to a city of refuge, and he should dwell in until the death of the high priest. Okay. Numbers 35:25. For anyone who there's rectification by returning from the city of refuge exiled, but for one whom there is no rectification by returning is not exiled. The high priest has no rectification, as we learned in the Mishnah. B. Now we're on top of 18b, top of the page. Ahoirei Kohen Gadol, or Kohen Gadol shehares hanefesh, eino yotze misham le'olam. Ema lo ligale kamash malan. Ve'ema hachinami. Umakra lanus shama kol rotzeach. Afilu Kohen Gadol b'mashma. With regard to one who kills a high priest, or a high priest who killed a person, he never departs from the city of refuge. Therefore, I will say that a high priest is not exiled at all. For that reason, the Braita above teaches that he is exiled. The Gemara suggests, why not say that the halacha is indeed that the high priest would not be exiled, since he would not be able to return home. The Gemara responds, the verse states concerning the city of refuge that every manslayer may flee there, Deuteronomy 19:3, and even a high priest is indicated by the inclusive term every. Over ala se velo ve'al lo tase lo sagi diro avar hachikamar. Im avar ala se ve'al lo tase arehu kehed yod lechol devarov. The Braita teaches that a high priest transgresses a positive mitzvah and a prohibition. The Gemara understands the Braita as an independent statement, asserting that the high priest must transgress a positive mitzvah and a prohibition, and asks, is it not possible that he doesn't transgress a positive mitzvah and a prohibition? Meaning, the high priest must the high priest transgress a positive mitzvah and a prohibition? The Gemara responds, this is what the Braita is saying. This is not an independent statement asserting that the high priest must transgress a positive mitzvah and a prohibition. Rather, the Braita teaches that if he transgressed a positive mitzvah and a prohibition, then he is considered to be like an ordinary person concerning all of his halachot, judged just as anyone else for common transgressions. Pshita. The Gemara asks, isn't this obvious? I wonder what the gematria of Pshita is. Let's see. Pshita equals 400. It's obvious. Pshita sloka daitach. Amina. Oil it's not in lo as a shave velo as a navi. Shekel. Velo as Kohen Gadol. Ela alpi based in shel shivim ve'echad. V'amar al-adebar ava kol davar hagadol yaviu elecha. Divarov shel gadol ema kol davar shel gadol kamash malan. The Gemara asks, isn't that obvious? The Gemara responds, no, as it could enter your mind to say that since we learned in the Mishnah 2a, the court judges cases involving an entire tribe that sinned, or a false prophet, or a high priest only on the basis of a court of 71 judges, the great Sanhedrin. And since Rav Ada bar Ahava says that the phrase "every great matter they shall bring to you," Exodus 18:22, refers to the matters of a great person, and the high priest, who is judged in a court of 71. Therefore, one might say that this means all the matters of a great person, including non-capital transgressions, are judged in a court of 71. Therefore, the Braita teaches us that for capital transgressions he is treated like an ordinary person and judged even by a court of 3. Because of divrei gadol davar hagadol, ksiv davar gadol mamash. The Gemara suggests, but why not say that indeed the halacha is that all cases involving the high priest must be adjudicated in the court of 71? The Gemara rejects this. It is written, the matters of a great person. Every great matter is written, meaning actually a great matter, one involving a capital transgression, not only one related to a great person. Okay, 6 minutes. Maybe we can pause it. Even a great, not only a capital transgression, but not only one related. It's a great matter, not only one related to a great person. Okay. Meid u'meidin oto meid. V'atanya v'italamta pamim she'ata mitalem v'pamim she'iyata ata mitalem ha'ketzad. The Mishnah teaches that the high priest testifies before the court and others testify concerning him. The Gemara expresses surprise he testifies, but isn't it taught in Braita that in the verse, "You shall not see your brother's ox or his sheep wandering and ignore them, you shall return them to your brother," Deuteronomy 22 verse 1. The use of the unusual term "and ignore them," as opposed to the more direct "do not ignore them," indicates that there are times when you ignore lost items, and there are times when when you do not ignore them. How so? Okay. Kohen v'hu b'beit hakvaros zaken v'ein lefi chavoidoi v'yishoysu malacha shloi meruba mishel chavero lekach demar v'hitalamta. The Braita answers, if the one who found the item was a priest and the lost item was in a cemetery where priests are prohibited from eating, or if he was an elderly person, it was not in keeping with his dignity to tend to a lost item of that kind, or if his work, which he would need to suspend in order to tend to and return the item is of greater value than the lost item of the other, one might think that he must nonetheless return it. Therefore, with regard to those cases, it is stated, and ignore them. Since a distinguished individual may ignore a mitzvah that is incumbent upon others, if it is not keeping with his dignity, perhaps the high priest would be allowed to ignore the obligation to testify due to his honor. Rav Yosef me'id lamelech v'tanan lo dan v'lo danin oto lo me'id v'lo me'idin oto ela Rav Zero me'id lavon me'id ben melech hedyotu. Rav Yosef said a high priest testifies only about a king, since such testimony would not compromise his dignity. The Gemara objects, but didn't we learn in the Mishnah above that a king does not judge and is not judged, and he does not testify, and others do not testify concerning him. Rather, Rabbi Zera said the meaning of Rabbi Yosef's statement is that a high priest testifies about a son of a king. The Gemara objects, the son of a king is an ordinary person without special status in halacha, so it is not in keeping with the high priest's dignity to testify concerning him. Ela me'id b'fnei HaMelech v'ha ein moshiv melech b'Sanhedrin mishum yikara dekoyin gadol atav yetev mikabli ne'aleh lesudate lesahadute kai hu ve'azil u'me'ainina le anan bedine. Rather, the meaning of Yosef's statement is that he testifies before the king, and it is not in keeping with the dignity of the high priest to testify if the king is a presiding judge. The Gemara objects, but didn't we learn in a Brayta in Tosefta 2:8 that a king is not seated on the Sanhedrin? The Gemara explains if Yosef is referring to a special arrangement. Due to the honor of the high priest, the king comes and sits as one of the judges. They receive his testimony, he rises and goes, and we deliberate about the case. Gufa Moshivin Melech B'Sanhedrin V'lo Melech V'Kohen Be'ibur Shana Melech B'Sanhedrin Nechsiv Lo Ta'ane Al Riv Lo Ta'ane Al Rav. Having mentioned this in the Brayta, the Gemara turns its attention to the matter itself. A king is not seated on the Sanhedrin, nor is a king a high priest, or a high priest seated on court for intercalating the year. The Gemara explains with regard to a king on the Sanhedrin, the source is as it is written, do not answer a case. No ta'ane al riv. Exodus 23 verse 2, which explained to mean, do not answer to a great person. Therefore, one whose stature will make the other judges afraid to contradict him may not be appointed to the Sanhedrin. Lo melech v'kohen gadol b'ibur shana melech mishum afsanya kohen gadol mishum tzina. The Gemara continues its explanation of the Brayta that nor is a king or a high priest seated on a court for intercalating the year. A king does not serve as a judge concerning this matter due to the sustenance of soldiers. Taxes were collected on a yearly basis, while the soldiers were paid monthly, so the king had a vested interest in not adding a month to the calendar. A high priest does not serve as a judge concerning this matter due to the cold. If a month is added to the calendar, then the high priest must perform his Yom Kippur immersions and walk barefoot on the floor of the temple deeper into the cold autumn. He too will have a vested interest in not adding a month. Papa says, learn from the ruling concerning the high priest that the weather of the year follows the months, meaning that changes in the seasons are in accordance with the sequence of the months with the standard, not intercalated calendar. The high priest would not want the year to be intercalated because then the colder weather of Mar Cheshvan would occur during Tishrei. The Gemara asks, is that so? But isn't that contradicted by the incident of those 3 cattle herders that were standing around and the sages heard them saying various statements about annual weather signs? Chadamar Im Bakir Lachish Chadienes. Excuse me 1 second, I gotta take a break for a moment. And now we resume recording. After the pause, let's see here. Where were we is the question. We're talking about weather signs. And what about the 3 cattle herders that are standing around? The sages heard them saying various statements about annual weather signs. Chadamar im Bakir Lachish Chadienes. Din Adar. Vim Lav let Din Adar. V'Hadar Amar V'Chad Amar Im Torah B'Tzivik V'Tlag Yimot V'Tiara B'Tul Te'ena Yidmok Shlach Mashke Din Hu Adar. Vim Lav let Din Adar. V'Chad Amar Im Kidum Ta'akif L'Chada Yehe Yifach Beloach Lefik Lekible Din Hu Adar Vim Lav let Din Adar. One of them said, if the first grains and the late ripening grains sprout at the same time, that is Adar. But if not, that is not Adar, but still Shvat. And one of them said, if an ox dies in the morning in the snow, indicating that it's still very cold, and at noon, in the shade of a fig tree it sleeps, rubbing against it to strip off its skin because of the heat, that is Adar, but if not, that is not Adar. And if one of them said, if there is a very strong east wind, which is cold, yet the warm air that you blow with your jaw goes out and toward it, and it overcomes its effect, that is Adar, but if not, that is not Adar. And since those signs had not yet come to pass, the sages intercalated the calendar that year. Okay? It is Rabbanan say Samuch Elo Rabbanan Achush Benayu Samuch Veroe Beker Istaoye Hu de Istaya Milsayu. The Gemara rejects this. And can you understand the sages relied on cattle herders to determine the halacha? Rather, the sages relied on their own calculations, and those cattle herders were supported inasmuch as their statements were supported by the sages' independent conclusion. Choletz v'choletzin kapasik v'tani lo shina mineres v'lo shina min nesuin bishlo min nesuin havi aseh v'lo. The Mishnah teaches that the high priest performs chalitza with his brother's widow, and his brother performs chalitza with his wife. But in any case, he does not consummate levirate marriage with his brother's wife. The Gemara comments, this Mishnah categorically teaches that the high priest does not consummate levirate marriage. There is no difference whether his brother's wife was a widow from betrothal alone, and no difference whether she was a widow from a marriage that had been consummated. Granted, it is understood that he does not consummate levirate marriage with a widow from marriage, since there is both a positive mitzvah, and he shall take a wife in her virginity, Leviticus 21:13, and also prohibition, a widow or one divorced, or a challah, or a zonah, he shall not take, Leviticus 21:14.